Field is set. The regular season is over. This is the Just Baseball show for Monday, October 2nd, brought to you by the fine folks at BetMGM. Jack McMullen, Aram Leighton. We got to talk about the sad news off the top. Tim Wakefield unfortunately passed away at 57 years old, so we're going to do that. Also, Miguel Cabrera might have played his final game. Well, has played his final game. A couple of guys might have played their final game. Zach Greinke, Joey Votto. Votto was tossed from what could have been his final game. Buck Showalter was forced to step down, which is a pretty loaded conversation. And then we got to get into who's in, who's out of the playoff field from over the weekend. But let's start with, the worst news of the weekend right away. Tim Wakefield passed at 57 years old on Sunday. Long battle with brain cancer that I wish we didn't know about. Like, that sucked. And I know that you and Peter talked about that a little bit. Curt Schilling was an asshole for exposing something that was, personal and private. But yeah. I love to see the outpouring from former teammates. I saw Kevin Youkilis, who was tearing up on Nesson. A beautiful tweet from Mike Lowell. There were a couple other guys, and a great video of Mike Timlin just came up, kind of citing Wakefield's selflessness and how good of a teammate he was. But just for the primer, if you as a listener are a little bit too young to remember Tim Wakefield, spent 19 years in the big leagues, 17 of which with the Boston Red Sox. He finished third in Rookie of the Year voting in 92. And I want to start with that 1992 season, his rookie year. This guy had 10 wins and 6 complete games in AAA before he got called up on July 31st. 6 complete games before the end of July. He comes up, major league debut, complete game win over the Cardinals, throws 146 pitches. He finishes third in Cy Young voting his first year in Boston, made an all-star team. He won 2 World Series in 04 and 07. He won 200 games exactly. He threw over 3,200 innings, and he finished with a career 4.41 ERA, and he threw until he was 44 years old. His knuckler was like the best. It sat mid-60s. I loved when he would mix in a fastball. I think he ran it up to like 74, 75.
I think he'd surprise you with an 80 every once in a while. He in his prime, he'd sneak in an 80.
Dude, regardless, this guy was obviously an amazing teammate, obviously an amazing dude. And what I remember from watching him was he was the most fun watch in baseball when that knuckleball was going, because it's such an oddity, and he did it better than anybody in that era.
Yeah, and I wish I could have had the pleasure of meeting Tim Wakefield, but it's you can just tell by and people love to say good things about people when they pass away, no matter what, even if they're not the nicest people on the planet. But you can tell when it's a different level, when people are just so touched by a person. And Tim Wakefield seems to be one of those people, just by judging by the reaction, judging by the outpouring of so many different people across the game and in so many other facets. But even from what I've been able to see just of him on TV when he was doing some stuff, around the game there and just interviews and the way he carried himself on the field, by all indications, just a phenomenal human being. And sometimes it's just frustrating how those are the guys that end up leaving this earth a little bit too soon. You talked about his career, and I thought you summed it up like incredibly well. And I think the most fascinating aspect of his career is before he even made his big league debut. This guy was drafted as a first baseman. Yeah. And I don't know if everybody knows that aspect of the story. He's born in Melbourne, Florida, and then played at Florida Tech, which I believe at the time it still is a Division II school, mashed there as a first baseman, and eventually gets picked by the Pirates. And I think it was the 88 draft. Apparently a scout told him, hey man, like you're never going to make it above AA as you are. And Wakefield decided to try to experiment with a knuckleball when he was playing catch, and just kind of started working on that and found something there. And, there was a quote from him saying that I just wanted to be able to say I tried everything I could do to make it. You know how hard it is to make it as a first baseman when you don't have a 9-something OPS in the minor leagues. And, it also shows you that this is a pretty humble dude and a very open-minded dude to take that constructive criticism and say, all right, let me go to the drawing board here and see what I can do. And he ends up winning 200 games later and winning World Series and making an all-star game and all the things that you said, and a Red Sox Hall of Famer, Clemente Award winner. You can go on and on and on and on. But I think it's just so incredible how he has his number retired at Florida Tech, when, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he ever really pitched there. So it's pretty awesome that you have something as unique of a path as Tim Wakefield's, and then as good of a career as he had through those years.
And here's the thing, he was an amazing pitcher, but based on the, I don't know, the love for him during his playing career, after his playing career, and especially what we saw on Sunday and what you're probably seeing today as well, you would have no idea that that guy had 5 ERA seasons. You would think that this guy was a 2.5 ERA guy every single year, but that's who Tim Wakefield is. And again, if you haven't seen that video, I think it was 07, might have been 04, of Mike Timlin talking, kind of like hijacking an interview that Wakefield was doing with Nesson and saying, this guy, like the amount of love I have for this guy, I can't really put into words, because he was professional and he understood being taken off the World Series roster when they did win the World Series. And there's a certain element to that where everybody's a professional. Everybody wants to be on the roster in big moments. But for that guy to say, yes, it might be the best scenario for me to not be on this roster, I think is like something you get from very, very few people. So
yeah,
clearly one of the good ones. And I like to think that the one knuckleball that George Kirby threw yesterday was an ode to Tim Wakefield. Knuckleball was disgusting. Did you see it?
Yeah, it was dirty.
That was gross.
It was nasty.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
So shout out George Kirby if that was an ode. And baseball clearly gonna miss Tim Wakefield. Miguel Cabrera just finished up his big league career, and there was a great tribute put out by the Tigers. It was narrated by J.K. Simmons, and it was really just a thank you, Miggy, and he had his kids there. And I mean, dude, like Adam Wainwright's done, Joey Votto might be done, Zach Greinke might be done, but it was Miggy that stood out above the rest. Obviously, Wayno's concert this past weekend was a hilarious little wrinkle in St. Louis, but I know you're the Miggy guy, and I know that this weekend was kind of full circle, with this being the first full season that the Marlins are playoff bound since Miggy was there in 2003. Am I right? So
yeah, isn't that wild?
That is crazy. But yeah, man, like, I don't know, when you think about Miguel Cabrera 5 years from now, what jumps to mind?
It's the swing, man. Every time I think about him, I just see that simple swing, his hands just driving the ball the other way. It's just one of the smoothest and most consistent and easy, repeatable swings. And it's just, that's why when people say one of the greatest right-handed hitters, of the last 50 years, and you can really say of all time, it's just so clear to me, because every time I think about him, I can just picture the smooth load and just the easy swing, and the ball just always jumped off of the bat. It was just like one of those things where it looks like he's barely putting in any effort, and it just jumped. And it's amazing because he did that in Comerica, for so many years, where it's a place where you don't just flick the ball the other way and hit it out to the right center gap. But for me, it was just the dominance and consistency up until, he hit that 33-year-old kind of age range where the knees started to go. And that's just the nature of the beast of this sport. And that always happens. But I mean, when you look at the numbers, the combination of being able to hit for average, hit for power, get on base, it's just one of the most aesthetically pleasing baseball reference looks that you're going to have up until age about 32, 33. But man, he just filled up the stat sheet, and he was just so much fun to watch hit.
It was kind of the Pujols thing. Like Pujols, if he didn't have that Angels tenure, his baseball reference page would be the stuff of legends. And it took Barry Bonds synthetically improving his baseball ability to make the baseball reference page look really good. So yeah, I mean, we could play the what if game. Like if you took out the last X amount of years for Miggy, his, career numbers will be X, Y, and Z. You can do the same thing with Votto too. But Miggy, what jumped out to me very similar to you, and I don't mean to put this on Yordan Alvarez, but the same feeling I get from watching Yordan, I got from watching Miggy during his Triple Crown season in the early 2010s. I was like, the question that kept coming to mind was, how can a dude that big be that fluid? He was a huge human at that time. And in Miami, he was not. He was a skinny kid. He was a young kid, and he was kind of a freak athlete, that kind of look. When he got to Detroit and he kind of finished what he was physically, he was a big dude, and those forearms were massive, and that torso was huge. yet everything worked so rhythmically and so fluidly. It was just kind of crazy to watch. I was like, they don't make them like this.
It's funny. The thing that really comes to my mind is like hitting shouldn't look that easy. And
Yeah.
that was the other thing I was going to say. Like, it's just wild how easy he made it look. He could get to any pitch. He never looked really fooled. He rarely took bad swings. And the most wild thing to me is you're looking at pretty much a stretch of 10 to 12 years, maybe a little bit more than that. I'd say closer to 15 years where he's pretty much hitting 300, a lot of times well over 300, and 30 bombs, a lot of times well over 30 bombs every single year. And I don't know if you realize, like, and not you, but just like general people like realizing, and I almost didn't think about it until more recently, how hard it is to win the Triple Crown in Comerica.
Yeah.
To lead the league in home runs. And he did that in a year where, you know, the home runs were down. And you know, as we kind of turned to 2010, 2011, 2012, you know, 44 home runs leading the league at Comerica is extremely, extremely difficult. But if you go through the reference page and just you're not going to find very many seasons with less than 30 home runs. And then adjacent to that, every year is 323, 339, 320. Oh no, a 292, 324, 328, 344, 330, 348, 313, 338, 316. Like, that's absolutely insane to do that just year over year over year batting average wise, while giving you 30 to 40 something home runs just about every single year too.
Is he unanimous? I know, like, Griffey wasn't, but as soon as Jeter and Rivera were unanimous,
Yeah,
that might have opened the floodgates.
yeah.
Is he a
Well,
unanimous?
Jeter got fucked.
What do you mean? Was
He
he not
wasn't unanimous. No, there was one asshole.
I don't know ball.
You don't know ball. There was one asshole that anonymously voted no or didn't vote for him.
Jackass.
Yeah. And so that's why I was going to answer the question of Ken Rosenthal had some really good thoughts on this on, I believe it was Ken Rosenthal on Foul Territory, right? If it was on Foul Territory, that would be Ken Rosenthal, right?
Yeah, I think they call it fair territory when he comes on, which is a nice little play on words.
I like that. Well, he was talking about how to him, it's unanimous shouldn't hold nearly as much weight as first ballot because of just one. He didn't want to say it, but I could see it. Like, basically, I'll say it for him. It takes one idiot. And I think he said it takes one like angry or disgruntled writer. I'll say it takes one idiot to make it about them or their interaction or whatever. The guy who didn't vote for Jeter, you know, he wanted to be able to talk to us like friends and private and probably be like, I was the one that didn't vote for Jeter, you know, because whoever did that, he or she is a weirdo, total weirdo. But the thing is I think there's a chance, you know, someone doesn't vote for him. And Rosenthal said, like, people rest on like weird aspects of it. Oh, he had the alcohol issue. He had this or that. Oh, he fell off after age 33. Like, I don't know. I can guarantee he's 95+% and he's first ballot. And I think I almost wish we had something else where it's like there's first ballot and then there's like the 95, the A+ club. Basically, if you have an A+ or above, you're in, because that still gives you enough margin for error there. Where, like, if you're in the 97% or above, I don't remember because I didn't get a lot of A+. What was the required percentage for an A+?
So I think A- was 90 to 92.
I thought 3.
I think A was 93 to 96. And then A+
Okay,
was
97 to 100. Yeah, give me like the A+ club. I think he's an A+ club guy.
How about just the A club?
Or the A club.
I want more people in the club. Like, you don't need to make it that exclusive.
Yeah.
What was it? I think Dan Shaughnessy voted for just Jeff Kent last year, which was pretty funny.
Yeah, that one pissed me off because he's, by all accounts, the least likable guy on the ballot.
Right. In the words of Jim Boeheim, not a journalist, an idiot. But yeah, man, I hope that there are not very many idiots that don't put Miggy on there and don't vote for Pujols too, because it's going to be back-to-back years, Pujols and Miguel Cabrera. Now, Yachty, different story, but I think Pujols and Miggy are probably the two closest things we've got there. Buck Showalter, Hall of Famer. Absolutely.
Yep.
Unceremonious end to his Mets tenure.
Yeah.
He announced it, and he is the most media-friendly manager that we've got in baseball. I think the two most media-friendly managers that we have in baseball are Showalter and Ross, and both those guys have had really rough goes of it.
Yeah.
But Buck Showalter announced that he will not be returning. He said that in his press conference pregame. And okay, let's read into that a little bit. Abby Mastracco, the New York Daily News, and your guy Tim Healy of Newsday had it and had follow-ups. And Tim pushed a statement from the Mets when they released it that had quotes from Steve Cohen, understandably so, and general manager Billy Epler. Now, Epler's going to have a boss today at noon. David Stearns is going to become the president of baseball operations. They will have a press conference at noon. They will then announce the direction of where they are headed managerially. But Epler still has a say. And for this guy to fail as miserably as he has this year, for him to pretty much say, if you don't retire, you're fired, to Buck Showalter, I find fascinating. I find backwards. And that's kind of what the New York Mets have been in 2023.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. I'm still trying to figure out where Billy Epler fits into this whole thing.
Like,
and part of me wants to separate it.
Is he going to be the punching bag moving forward? What's his deal?
I kind of think he's like the fall guy, and also just the guy that, he's almost the liaison where, Epler was kind of a part of rebuilding this farm, and it helps when you have money to acquire prospects. But, I think Epler, we talked about it, could maybe thrive a little bit more in that second fiddle role. And I just think he's been in over his head as a GM. So, to me, it's the equivalent of like, okay, this coach didn't work out in the NFL. Rather than firing him, because this would never work in the NFL. Most of the time when a coach gets fired, they get a DC job elsewhere, whereas they started before in terms of like, oh, this guy's a great DC. Let's try him as a head coach. Doesn't work as a head coach, then goes back to DC. Yeah. Usually doesn't happen with the same team. It seems like with the Mets, Epler is going to go from kind of coach back to DC. And you know what? Usually those guys, when they go back to DC, do pretty well. So it's outside the box. It's unique. But I think if there's things that they like that Epler's doing in there in terms of farm development, whatever it may be, then that's an interesting aspect of it. But let's be real. Stearns is calling the shots here, and that's good because Epler is not a good shot caller. We talk about the Batman, the Robin. I think he can be, Epler can be a fine Robin. So that part's interesting. But to kind of answer and respond to your point, it does feel backwards that the Hall of Famer is being let go by the guy that's been pretty trash for like the last half decade plus and hasn't really earned the right to fire or let go a Hall of Famer. But that said, I think he's more of the messenger in this. And I think that came from Steve Cohen, who ultimately said, this isn't the right guy here. And it probably came from Stearns too, if we're going to be honest, because Stearns knows, hey, there's a way I want to go about my business here. And there's a way I want this team run. And it's not with all due respect, a more archaic manager. And I think we saw the results of a more archaic manager over the last 2 years. And with things kind of going more forward thinking with Stearns, I think it would have only furthered the gap between front office and manager.
Counsell is still in Milwaukee. Gabe Kapler was just fired by the San Francisco Giants. You're shaking your head. Do you think it's Counsell? It sounds like, based on like everything that's been put out over the last week or so, that Counsell may not be back in Milwaukee. Yeah. His contract's up. I'm not sure if they renew it.
Which is so bizarre, by the way, because I think he's arguably the most underrated manager in the sport. It's not like Milwaukee is perpetually loaded, but they are perpetually solid in terms of being able to compete. To me, that's a sign of a good manager. I mean, they've had players. Stearns. Yeah, they've had players traded away midseason. They are always in it. Or do they push it across the finish line? No, because they don't ever help them. They don't ever really make major acquisitions. Stearns has done a good job of fielding a good team, and I think it's a big reason why they've been competitive. But you got to give Craig Counsell his credit, and I think he's one of the more respected guys in the game as well. If the Brewers don't re-up, it's a no-brainer, right? You got Stearns in Milwaukee, or you got Stearns from Milwaukee in New York already. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a good relationship there. And you know what? He's going to get more money. And the Brewers are cheap. That's probably part of the reason why they don't want to keep Counsell. I don't know why. Yeah. To me, it's mind-blowing that they wouldn't, keep Counsell. That's crazy. If they don't, the Mets, I think, will be all over that. And it's almost makes too much sense.
Let's open that can of worms real quick on the Kapler thing, because you were like vehemently shaking your head no. Are you out on him getting a managerial job?
I mean, I never doubt the nature of sports, which is let's just recycle the same failed managers or coaches or what. It's amazing how every sport does that.
He's gonna get another shot. Yeah,
probably. I have maintained. I mean, they had the one magic season in San Francisco, but I maintain I don't think Gabe Kapler is a good manager. I just don't. In Philadelphia, people were clowning him to death about how, questionable his in-game decisions were and how things were going. And then we have the platoon masterclass of what was that season, which is what Kapler loves to do. Yep. Things worked out perfectly that year where they had the perfect team for platooning and guys thrived in their roles. And now you have a different team and he couldn't adjust and he tried to over platoon and it was over managing. And obviously there was a huge disconnect between the front office and Kapler, the team and Kapler, and there was a lot of throwing under the bus there. I've just never been a big Gabe Kapler guy. And it's not only because he FaceTimes Farhan Zaidi, from Starbucks on his laptop. Like it's not just that. Like,
he's so chiseled. He takes such
he's
good
handsome
care
as
of his body.
shit. He's handsome as hell. He's jacked and he doesn't eat cake. I agree. Yeah. But I'm just not, if I'm a team that is trying to maintain, I just don't think Kapler's the guy. And I think this is just, there's a balance to be had. Like, I think Buck Showalter's way on the other end. I think Kapler is too far on the other end. And I don't see Kapler as a guy that just is a player's manager. You'd think he would be, but it just strikes me as the opposite. I don't know if he rubs players the right way, even though he's a younger guy. I think there's a little bit of this aura to him that in not a positive way. And I just look back at that Brebbia situation. Yeah. I mean, John Brebbia playing keep away with him with the ball when he's trying to come off the mound. Like, that was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life. Just something rubs me the wrong way about Gabe Kapler, but I've also hated his in-game decisions dating back to Philadelphia. Yeah. Yes, they had that one magical season. And then recently, I just haven't liked the way he goes about his business there.
Right. So it was almost like San Francisco was reluctant to gather star power during like Gabe Kapler's managerial tenure in San Francisco, because there's no such thing as a star in San Francisco. And
that's not his fault.
It's not his fault, but like they could get one as soon as he's gone. Like this free agent period, Ohtani can absolutely be a giant. I think he is a San Francisco Giant, but I don't know, man. Like the one quote unquote star that they went to acquire during the Gabe Kapler era was Jock Peterson, who was, wait for it, a platoon guy. Yeah. And they tried to massage him into an everyday guy, but now he's just a platoon guy that plays half the time in lefty-lefty matchups, and he was an all-star for that reason. So, I mean, dude, like he was the master of getting too cute. And I'm with you. I guess I never really like took a firm stance on this guy's a bad manager, because it's really hard to say that after an 107 win season. But I appreciate your, like confidence in saying that you don't think he's a good one.
Yeah, well, because I felt that way before, and I saw a lot when he was in Philly, obviously, because I was following the Marlins a little bit closer then too. And I don't know, I just didn't like the in-game decisions, and I thought it was a little bit of like paralyzing over managing. The last thing I will say though is this is not all on Gabe Kapler. I do feel like he's the fall guy here to a degree. They didn't put that good of a team out there. I've said that since day one. I thought the Giants were not a good roster going into the year. They started pretty well and then really fell off, and we saw a lot of the issues exposed. Yeah, they had some injuries and bad luck. I really think that Farhan Zaidi is just as much of the issue too, if not more. I've maintained that point too. I know Giants fans either are going to love me or hate me for these two takes, but I've thought Farhan Zaidi is one of the more overrated execs in baseball as well. And we've talked about it on the call up. I've broke it down in detail when it comes to player development and the things that they've done there. You look at some of the decisions they've made, whether it was, bringing up Wade Meckler when they didn't need to just yet, throwing him into the fire. And now they furthered their 40-man crunch. They wouldn't have had to protect him from the Rule 5 for another year. Rushing Casey Schmidt up there. Marco Luciano's development has been totally messed up in the way that they've handled it. I just think that there's a lot of different things that have been mishandled. And you look at all of their top prospects through the years, they just have not developed the way that people thought, except for Patrick Bailey. So there's just, I don't know, there's a lot of moving parts here. I thought that the Kyle Harrison situation has been handled pretty bizarrely. Yeah. I think Farhan Zaidi needs to wear a lot of this too.
Damn, man. All right. So Ethan Badowski just tuned out, our social media guy. So you just kind of crapped on his Giants. We're about to get to his Cubs before we get to his Marlins, but we're going to get to your Marlins as well.
Yeah, fan of 20% of the National League.
Real quick, tying a bow on the Mets thing, and this is totally unrelated to Buck Showalter and Billy Epler and, the Gabe Kapler rabbit hole that we went down. I saw something clipped from the director at SNY. John is his first name. I'm blanking on his last name, but I love the way SNY pushes creative boundaries on local telecasts. Like they do
Yeah.
a great job kind of visually moving the bar because frankly, the bar isn't moved on many local broadcasts. They look the exact same night in, night
Yeah.
out for
It's cookie
120
cut.
days. Very cookie cut. SNY, not cookie cut. I really appreciate that. But there was one thing that just kind of highlighted this macro conversation in baseball that I saw, and I was like, come on, man. It was a split screen, and I love when they do it between batter looking at pitcher and pitcher looking at batter. It's almost theatrical.
Yeah.
But it was a close-up of Kyle Schwarber, and then on the other side, it was zoomed in on the video board of his 197 batting average. And I can't do this anymore. Like
Yeah.
I'm out of gas with the Kyle Schwarber thing. And I, of the three of us, am certainly the batting average guy. I know that. I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
I do love a good batting average guy. I love a 300 hitter. But you cannot tell me that because Kyle Schwarber is hitting 197, he's not having a good year. Kyle Schwarber has 46 pumps, 101 driven in, and his win probability added is greater than Gunnar Henderson, Bo Bichette, Marcus Semien, Luis Ariz, and Pete Alonso, to name a few.
Yeah.
This guy's had a great year. He just happens to have a batting average that doesn't look good. But guess what? His OBP looks great. He's walked over 100 times. His slugging looks awesome. He's hit 46 jacks. I
Yep.
can't do this anymore with him.
Yeah, he also signed to be a DH. Like the plan was for him to mostly DH and not play the outfield as much as he had to this year. But you have Rhys Hoskins go down, and then you have the Harper situation as well, and not being able to play in the field. And yeah, he sucked out there. Not supposed to be out there. He can't do it. He's bad. And I know it's like, oh, will they get better at defense? Not in the cards for him. That's not what he was supposed to do. That's not the expectation. So yeah, I think the conversation around Schwarber is interesting because it's like, we're expecting him to do things that he wasn't expected to do because he has to step up and do it. Like, what if he just said, no, I'm not playing the outfield?
Right.
He would be screwing his team. He's trying. He tried to go out there. He's not good at it. He's actually particularly terrible at it. But again, that was never the plan. Things have just kind of unfolded poorly. And that's why you have a low WAR. And that's why you have, I think part of the reason why you don't have as high of a batting average, I think he's like just literally more fatigued and less consistent. He's getting his swing off a couple times a game. He's connecting, but he's maybe not as consistent as he should be. Obviously, if you walk a bunch, I don't really care what your batting average is. If he was hitting 220, people would shut the hell up. The problem is it's below the Mendoza line, and
If
there's
he was
just
hitting,
something.
if he was hitting 205, they would shut up. I'm telling you.
There's something visual about the one, man. And look, I'm with you. He's good. Like I have no issue. He's a big reason why they've been successful this year. But I do wonder, like, there's something about the one that just it skeeves you out. You don't want to see a one in a batting average. Like it just doesn't look good. It looks terrible. So he's a good player, but you can't have a one in the batting average. You just can't. Sit at 200, sit at 201, and it's fine. But you can't lead with the one. It never goes well.
If he hit 206 with these numbers, we're not having this conversation. You're right. There's something about the one. If it was 199, we'd be, oh, he's oh so close to not sucking. Oh, guess what? He's got 100 ribbies this year.
Yeah.
He doesn't suck. All right, let's go rapid fire between the teams that were bounced on Saturday and the teams that solidified themselves as in on Saturday. Cubs, Reds, Mariners, all three bounced on Saturday. The Reds, great story at the beginning of the year. Luke Weaver had like a 7 ERA and an 8-start span, and the Reds won every single game. Cool, not sustainable. I think we knew that. They're fun. They look really exciting for next year and moving forward. This year was not their year. The Chicago Cubs and Seattle Mariners both full-blown collapsed, and the Cubs was way worse.
Yeah.
Since the Cubs started their skid in Colorado on September 12th, they ranked 4th in all of baseball in team OPS. They did not stop hitting. They had an 800 team OPS since September 12th, but they had a 4.84 staff ERA during that stretch, and their bullpen was bad. Their bullpen was battered. And the managerial decisions, which we highlighted at the end of last week, man, they came back to bite them game after game after game. The Cubs, I think more so than the Mariners, really did feel like a choke job, which sucks to say.
Yeah, we talked about the Cubs one, so I don't want to make Cubs fans want to
Yeah.
like tune us out. It's
You
funny.
guys
My
suck. I'm
friends
out.
Yeah, my friends that are Dolphins fans, like, they got worked against the Bills, and they're like, well, I guess no sports media this week, and I don't want it to be that way for Cubs fans. Like we'll talk about a lot of good, and I still think the future is bright, extremely bright in Chicago. Maybe it's with a different guy at the helm. Maybe it's with some different things shaken up. I think they should absolutely pay Cody Bellinger. They need a superstar, and there was. I think it was Bleacher Nation or Michael who runs the account there, but
Yeah.
he made a comment on the top jersey sales, and there was not a Cub within. I think it's Michael Cerami, right?
Michael
That's the
Cerami.
name.
Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't a Cub in the top 20. And that just shouldn't be the case. It's the freaking Chicago Cubs. And I think if you extend Cody Bellinger, he's a guy in the top 20. And as he said in the tweet, that's not a barometer for success, but I think the Cubs have seen enough this year to say, hey, we need to retain a superstar here and maybe go get somebody else and keep trying to push the chips forward here. Terrible collapse, really frustrating, really disappointing. But this is also a team that's showed me enough, I think has showed the front office enough, showed everybody enough that they are ready to compete next year and ready to be a legitimate National League contender, like, for the pennant. So that's the positive side. The negative side is, I mean, they had a 90%, and I don't buy into the probability, but, I think the probability was pretty accurate there. If I was going to give some, number in my head, they had a 90% chance to make the playoffs, whether you ask Fangraphs, Baseball Reference, whatever it was. And that's where I would have put it myself too. Obviously you can't really just put a number on it, but it seemed pretty accurate to me. It was theirs to lose. We were talking about them potentially leading, taking the first spot in the wild card, and then look at where they're at now. It just seemed like, with the Reds, as you mentioned, it was a team coming back to earth. You look at the roster, it's like, okay, that's what they're supposed to do. But when you look at the Cubs and the Mariners, it's kind of like, what happened? How did they get there? And that's usually where you can't say anything other than collapse.
Yeah, well, and the Mariners, we had sky high expectations, and they were so slow out of the gates, and then they turned it on, and then they sputtered at the tail end. But the Cubs, it was, this year isn't the year. Like, they're a 500 team. And then at the beginning of the year, it was, okay, they're a 500 team. And then by the break, it was, okay, they're a little bit better than a 500 team. And then right after the break, it was, they're a wild card team. And then they sputter late. So
yeah,
both teams sputtered late, but I think we had different preseason expectations for these two. And I think the roller coaster kind of turned in different ways pre-All-Star break for those two.
Yeah.
Real quick, tinfoil hat. And I don't know. I guess I'm going to be the sensationalist.
You're going to say Ohtani to the Cubs?
No, it's 10-15 in Europe. I'm going to say a different angel. Priority one is Bellinger, because you don't have to give up assets, just money. But if you can't get Bellinger, Mike Trout to the Cubs is an option, man. I mean, dude, they have the spending, they have the budget to do it, and they also have one of the better farms in baseball.
Yeah.
It, like, that works. And I don't know what Trout's going to cost prospect wise, but man, like,
not a ton. Not as much as you think because of the money. You could offset some money with the like Tyone contract, send it the other way, like
sure.
Try to send some stuff the other way. I mean, dude, it's not crazy. I think the Cubs are going to try to stay so true to what they're building for sustainable success.
Yeah.
But I think they should vet out and see what's out there. I would love to see them go after like Yamamoto and I think the big reason why they fell apart is, Stroman going down. I think that really hurt. Yeah, Justin Steele hit, this innings marker that, he just never sniffed before, and he saw him slow down, over the last month and change. And then the rest of the rotation, that was our big concern anyway. So it's just not a great rotation. Then on the Mariners side, Robbie Ray goes down. I know he's not Cy Young Robbie Ray, but that's depth that hurts, because then you got to lean on rookies or young arms who, just again, ran out of gas. I mean, Wu was great for most of the year, but Brian Wu far exceeded any innings, marker. George Kirby literally complained about being fatigued. They just ran out of gas. So, I do kind of hear what Cal Rowley was saying in terms of like, hey, we need to go get bigger names. And that was part of the frustration with the Mariners, is like, you'd expect them to, after what they did last year, to kind of push the chips forward a little bit more. I think we talked ourselves into it because it's like, oh, then now they have Teoscar, now they have a couple guys that can, maybe they'll make a leap, but I thought too much was put on Julio. And that's why the first half of the season was so bad for them is, Julio struggled. And then the second half was so good because Julio performed. I know there's more moving parts to that, but I think Julio was too important to, like, no team that is supposed to compete for a pennant should be, I think, impacted by one player that much. And I mean, you look at the Mariners, you take Julio out of the lineup versus when you have him in, or have Julio performing well versus when he's not performing. I don't know if there's a team in baseball that's as impacted by one player's performance as the Mariners are with Julio, a competing team, that is.
I just don't think they were planning for that, though. Like that's my thing. So yes, I agree with you. We look back at the 2023 season and we say, okay, they were so ridiculously dependent on Julio Rodriguez. I can counter and say that's because a lot of guys were underwhelming. Cal Raleigh had a really slow start to the year. Teoscar Hernandez was not the Teoscar they traded for.
Big disappointment.
Fucking Colton Wong took a 180 in his career. I thought Wong was a great get for them in spring training.
I thought he'd be fine, yeah.
And here we go, and he signed a minor league deal with the Dodgers in August.
Suarez regressed.
Gino regressed, and Ty France regressed. Like, there were so many guys that took a step back in that Seattle offense. So I can't say honestly, like, I can't say that I agree with Cal Raleigh, to be totally honest. I'm like,
I think that's fair.
Names. I'm like, dude, when you got Teoscar, he was a big name. When you got Colton Wong, that created a ripple in Major League Baseball. We said, oh, wow, the Mariners are cooking.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's the one thing they needed. I mean, and I know people aren't getting pumped about Colton Wong, but it was kind of what made sense. Excuse me. And then you also saw them, just kind of trending in the direction where you're like, all right, they're just going to keep getting better from within as well. So I am with you on that. And then JP Crawford played like an all-star this year overall, like, especially at the end, he really turned it on. And so it is interesting to hear him say that. And I'm kind of thinking about it, like, who did Cal Raleigh want them to go get? Who was out there that would have been better? I mean, Teoscar was kind of exactly what they needed. He just didn't hold up his end of the bargain. I think the one thing I wanted to mention really quickly, I know we got some other teams to talk about, was I don't agree with what George Kirby said, a month ago, and I don't agree with what Cal Raleigh said totally. I mean, I understand that the desire for, pushing the chips forward and being competitive.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that two of the young core players for the Mariners, who frankly could be franchise pieces, who frankly are both pre-arb, candidates for this team and guys that you want to lock up for the foreseeable future. We talk about Raleigh as one of the best catchers in the game, and George Kirby is a guy that I think is one of the best young arms in the game. Speaking out of turn, kind of, and I wouldn't say out of turn, they have the right to say whatever they want, but speaking out in what I guess Scott Service and the front office would say is out of turn. You don't see that a lot, especially from young guys. And it's not like George Kirby and Cal Raleigh are these like loose cannon, Jazz Chisholm type figures that just kind of say whatever they want and whatever comes to their mind. So I wonder what's going on within there. I wonder what the clubhouse dynamic is like there. I wonder what the connection or divide is between manager, front office, and team, because I just find it interesting that on multiple occasions, you have young players speaking out about decision-making and two different types of decision-making, how one pitcher is being handled himself and how the team is being built. Those are two things that you generally it's taboo to speak on as a player, whether you're a veteran or a youngster. And both of these guys are youngsters.
Yeah. And the thing about Seattle is, yes, I've heard the cries that have been anti-Dipoto when they moved Kendall Graveman at the 21 deadline. Like, you heard the Dipoto thing, and that Dipoto is just kind of a wild card at points. I've really never heard any anti-Scott Service rhetoric. I think this might just be two young guys like saying things they shouldn't be saying.
I agree. Jeff Conine, when we were doing Outside the Box, he had nothing but great things to say about Scott Service and the way like he it was a teammate and interacted with people in the way everything he understands and people we've talked to, the way he interacts and manages a team. Like, I know Niner was a big Scott Service guy and loves the way he goes about his business.
I know there are a lot of announcers that are big Scott Service people. I was listening to a podcast with Boog Shambi, who I know was on Outside the Box, and he's a huge Scott Service guy. Like, here's the thing, man. Like, if that guy is that well respected and you've got two guys that are pre-arb and not vets by any means, you may think that Raleigh's a vet. You may think that Kirby is entering vet status. They're not. They're very far from that. You got to get to free agency to be considered a vet, I think. And for these two pre-arb guys to speak their mind like that to the media, it's very weird. And I know that we've got kind of a firecracker in Kelnick too. Seattle has some characters in the clubhouse, to
Yeah.
say the least.
Yeah. The Kalnick one is interesting. Who would have thought like we wouldn't be talking about Kalnick as much as these guys in terms of like Kalnick's the guy that I would expect to say something like that.
Yeah.
But he can't because he hasn't performed that well and then he kicked a cooler. So he's just got to kind of be quiet and mind his own business over there. But yeah, I mean, he disappointed when he came back too. He did the whole Kalnick roller coaster is a whole nother story too. Mariners could be a whole podcast.
A whole podcast. 5 teams that are in right now, 2 on the National League side, 3 on the American League side. They locked up their spots on Saturday. Longest one first, then we go rapid fire through the final 4. But I think it's worth it to spend time on the Miami Marlins, who got in a full season.
Yep.
We're not counting 2020.
Don't count that shit.
In a full season for the first time since Miguel Cabrera was 20 years old in 2003. By year, I love this. Our friend Chris, who is at Baseball Pods, loves tweeting out the call up and the Just Baseball show. Amazing guy. I saw him put out something, and I guess he's a Yankee fan. He said Kim Ng would be perfect for the Yankees. I say no. She stays put in Miami because she's building a wagon. But he put out this number that I thought was fascinating. The Marlins in 3 years under Kim Ng, 29th in team OPS, 27th in team OPS. This year, they jumped to 18th in team OPS. Second worst team in baseball, 4th worst team in baseball, and now they're knocking on the door of league average. Yeah. And in that ballpark, with that payroll, that's so hard to do to make that jump in 3 seasons. But she aced the Berger trade, it seems. We'll see what Eater becomes. She aced getting Josh Bell at the deadline. She has found some guys either in free agency or via trade. Brian De La Cruz for Jimmy Garcia. Come on now.
Yeah. Well, that was my trade.
Yeah, that was your trade. Sorry. So Kim Ng, great job listening to Aram.
That will forever be the most impressive thing I'll ever do. And for those who don't know, it might be newer to the show. When I was hosting Locked On Marlins, I did mock trades before the deadline, and I literally did Jimmy Garcia to the Astros for Brian De La Cruz. And then 3 days later, that exact trade went down, and people thought like, "Whoa, like you got sources?" I was like, "No," because Jeff wasn't with the team at that point. I could there was nothing you could possibly tie. It was just the craziest pull in my life. But yeah, that was a nice move.
That was a great move. So, yeah, I mean, I just want to open the floor to you, too, because I know you've got like a rant type thing ready, but Kim might be the savior of the Miami Marlins.
Yes, because there's a lot of things. I'm going to be all over the place here because, I mean, 2020 was cool and all, whatever. 2020 wasn't a measure of a good team because 31-29 doesn't tell me shit. And yeah, they won that one series against the Cubs. That Cubs team wasn't good either. And they won that series with nobody in attendance and Sixto Sanchez pitched. Doesn't matter. That makes it as fake as humanly possible if Sixto Sanchez pitched. But where Derek Jeter left this team, and I think people kind of blur the lines, is like, yes, Kim was brought in as the GM, but at that time, Jeter was still the shot caller, and that's something I know for a fact. And Gary Dembo was still a shot. She was probably 3rd in the pecking order of being able to do what she wanted to do. I really look at the Kim Ng era from when Derek Jeter, kind of steps away onward. And that's really just the last year and change. And I think what she's been able to do, especially this year and going into this year, is where you can really focus on, a comfortable and free Kim Ng being able to actually call the shots. And I said that before this year. So this isn't me just saying it because, hey, they're successful now. This is Kim. Any failure that's attached to Derek Jeter. She's made some mistakes, as any new GM has. But what's amazing to me is the way that she's been able to kind of maneuver around that and maybe try to adjust and capitalize. And I look at the Luis Arias trade. That's the first domino here of I think what was a really impressive turnaround of a team. They were striking out too much last year, and they weren't hitting for much power. What do? Okay, first you go get the best contact hitter in the game. People were up in arms. Oh my God, the Marlins got fleeced because they attached Jose Salas. She knew that there was going to be a negative reaction by attaching some prospects there. And they attached another guy with the last name Chorio. He must be good. Who knows? no one cares about Jose Salas and Brian Chorio. I can tell you a lot of people care about Luis Arias right now. The team would be nowhere near where they're at without him. Then, yeah, Pablo Lopez has been great for them. Sure. But the Marlins have been fine pitching wise. Of course, you can always use an arm like him, but I wouldn't undo the trade right now. That was the first move. You have the out of their minds season in the first half of the season. And then they hit a freaking wall. And I think at that point we were saying, should the Marlins even be buyers? And I was like, I don't know. Not only was Kim left with a bad Major League Baseball team, she was left with one of the worst farm systems in Major League Baseball and also a limited budget because they're a small market team that can't really spend much. Yes, it was a mistake to go sign Cueto. Yes, it was a mistake to throw some money at Gene Segura, but that's when you're just trying to sign whatever you can within your confines. It's not her fault that nobody wanted to come there. Justin Turner took less money elsewhere. Brennan Drury took less money elsewhere because nobody was winning there before, and you have to have a little bit of proof of concept. But they end up going into kind of the All-Star break and then going closer to the deadline. And we're saying, okay, now they're falling apart after that break. And they could have just said, we don't have much of a farm system as is. Let's not make any moves. Instead, she gets creative and figures out a way to upgrade the team with almost no prospect capital, cashing in Jake Eder for Jake Berger, finding somebody that I didn't think was going to get better and kind of buying low and getting him, in the right situation. I think there had to be some communication with Brant Brown, the Marlins hitting coach of, hey, can you see something with these guys? You think you can unlock a little bit more? And Brant Brown unlocked a little bit more with both Josh Bell and Jake Berger, and they've both talked about that. It was a little tweak, and things have really gotten rolling. Up until the trade deadline, the Marlins were 28th in home runs. Then you go up from the trade deadline onwards, they're tied for 12th in homers. And I know there's more to the game than just hitting home runs, but the Marlins were so deprived of being able to just drive in runs in general and being able to change the score with one swing of the bat. Soler was the only guy that was really doing that. Jazz when he was healthy. And we're seeing the power fluctuate so much when Jazz was healthy and when he wasn't, because he was such a key part of that. You go get somebody like Josh Bell, who at that point, I don't think anybody wanted him. He was an expensive first baseman who was a negative WAR guy, sub 100 WRC plus. She said, no, I still believe in this guy. I think we can unlock more. Trades for him, 11 home runs in 53 games, a 120 WRC plus. Jake Berger was performing, but people said, no, this is a bubble. It's not going to stay. Instead, it's the opposite. Since he's been traded to the Marlins, he's slashing 303, 355, 505, and has been a huge reason why this Marlins team has been successful. So not only does Kim get arguably their two best power bats, she gets them with control because I don't think Bell's opting out and Berger's under control for years. And all she traded was Khalil Watson, a failed first-round pick that I'm attaching to the previous regime, and Jake Eder, who, he's a solid pitching prospect. He's 25 years old and doesn't really fit in for them right now with all of the arms that they have. And she's able to dump Gene Segura's salary with that. I mean, you got to tip your cap to Kim Ng. And there were so many people doubting her, not respecting her. And at this point, you have to respect what Kim Ng has done with this team and being able to upgrade it with limited financial means and one of the worst farm systems in Major League Baseball.
And she got two guys at the deadline that really wanted to be there. And I'm hung up on Berger and Bell because they really elevated the offense, like you're saying, from a power standpoint. But Bell, seeing the post-game conversations he'll do with Steven Strom, who does a great job on pre and post with the Marlins. But like seeing the conversations there and seeing how active, and it might just be because Berger's a social media guy and his family's social media people, but like it seems like Jake Berger fucking loves being a Miami Marlin, which is really cool. And I've heard like so many people say that Jake Berger is one of the good guys in Major League Baseball. And I'm making him like priority 1A to get on the show this offseason because I want to talk to Berger so bad about this year. This cat, man, like I'm so happy for him being a guy that went through the shit after being a first round pick of the White Sox. And I mean, like, kind of being on the most demoralizing team that I've ever seen in sports this year and somehow making it out the other side and being so happy to be there. So I tip my cap to the Marlins. I think Kim Ng should be a general manager until the day she retires. She has proved so much in the last 365 days. I cannot tell you how impressed I am by Kim Ng.
Last thing. She also hired Skip Schumacher.
Yes. Wow.
Skip
Is he
Schumacher
manager of
has
the year?
been he's easily. I mean, you can go Snit any year because of how good the Braves are, but
But he works
I
on
mean,
vibes. Skip works on
yeah,
like other shit.
I mean, it's incredible. And the bullpen and some of the pieces that they've been able to add there but hiring Skip Schumacher just seems like the perfect fit for this team. And that's a huge part of it as well. That the managerial process was an interesting one. And we didn't know quite, who they were going to go with, what direction they were going to go. And they picked the right guy. And it's been awesome to see that. So when you trade for two players, when your team is literally drowning and they end up accounting for 30% of your home runs since the break and a majority of your production, and then you also, before the season, hired the right manager to help you weather that storm. I mean, Kim Ang, one, needs to be extended, and I know she will. I'd be shocked if she didn't. And two, needs to be respected more by the baseball community. And I think people are starting to realize that this woman's for real.
Put some respect on Kim Ang's name. All right, final four teams we're going to go rapid fire through. Arizona is in on the National League side, per the GOAT, Sarah Langs. The Diamondbacks, the third team in Major League history to go from an 110-plus loss season to a playoff berth within 3 seasons. The other two teams to do that are this year's Baltimore Orioles and the 2015 Houston Astros, who lost 111 games in 2013. By the way, do you know who the scouting director was for the Houston Astros from 2013 to 2018?
The scouting director for the Houston Astros
turned them from an 111 loss team to the dynasty that we see now.
Wasn't Anthopoulos.
Hint, involved with one of the other two teams that I just mentioned.
Oh, so it's the all right, just tell me. I'm blanking
It's
on
Mike
names.
Elias. Mike Elias was the scouting director for Houston.
Dude, that guy drafts like a menace.
A menace, bro. Insane. Yeah. By the way, quick shout out Colton Cowser, grand slam in the AAA championship game. Norfolk,
the least surprising champion of all time for the minor leagues, the Norfolk Tides. Like, of course they won.
Starting lineup. I gotta find that starting lineup, but off the dome, I think it was Holiday, Norby, Cowser, Stowers, Joey Ortiz,
Lewin
Diaz,
Anthony Bemboom.
Yeah, that's like 7 hitters right there. I mean, they were a freak show.
You said Jackson Holiday, of course, right?
Holiday. Yeah, Holiday led off and played short.
I think there was 5 top 100 guys, like just baseball top 100 guys in that lineup.
Just and then you got Kyle Stowers too, just hanging out.
Yeah, who's just a really good baseball player who's just was banged up all year. I mean, just insanity. They had Ryan McKenna in that lineup too.
Yeah, there you go. So no, man, Arizona has that massive turnaround. Ketel Marte getting great again this year is huge. But like, dude, this year was all about Carroll and Gallen and Merrill Kelly. And I'm so excited to talk about these guys. But I mean, credit to Arizona, man. They got hot at the right time, at the tail end of the year.
Can I make a weird prediction?
Sure.
I see them throwing money at Aaron Nola. I don't know why.
I
don't know why. I don't know why. And that's just a fit I love because they don't need Aaron Nola to be an ace. Aaron Nola could be a 3, and they're all right. You probably want him to be a 2. You're going to pay him to be a 2. But I think that's a perfect fit. They've been wanting to spend money, and you got to feel like you're in a great position to spend money. This is a house money year for me. If I'm thinking about the D-backs, of course, no fans want to hear that. Of course, the D-backs aren't going to say that. But they are making the strides that we were hoping to see them make. No one's expecting them to win the World Series. Maybe they make it out of the wild card. Maybe they put up a fight in the first round. Maybe they can sneak out of the first round. But what I love is that this team just took another step closer. And I do think they're going to spend this offseason. So I'm just really excited about the future of Arizona and where they're headed. And they've got some good prospects still continuing to make their way through the pipeline too.
100%. You mean Lynn's Cy Young campaign in 2026? It's gonna
go crazy.
I already put money on it. 2026 Cy Young. You mean Lynn? I don't think it's on BetMGM. I went offshore.
Not yet. Not yet.
All right. Texas, Houston, and Toronto are in on the American League side. I want to shout out Houston because Houston took care of fucking business when they needed to take care of business. And it was a workmanlike celebration when they did get in. Houston won 4 of 5. They're leading in Arizona 8-1 through 8. They're going to win 5 of 6 to end the season. they could very well win the American League West. I think if they win and Texas loses, and Texas and Seattle are going on right now, they are inevitable. And this year, among all the others, proved that they are inevitable.
I tried to be edgy and say, hey, I love the Astros experience. Of course, I just feel like this is light work for them, but I like the matchups. Maybe the Mariners sneak their way in, and of course, there's more to the game than just what kind of matches up, when you see the schedule there. But I had to die on the Mariners hill, I guess, but it's just too easy for the Astros in regards to, not saying baseball is easy. This has been an up and down season for them. And a lot of the guys that they had rolling, yeah, I was really concerned about Hunter Brown. I haven't loved everybody, we went through it. Like everybody in the second half, basically in the rotation, other than Justin Verlander's had like a 4+ ERA as a starter. So it is surprising. But again, as you kind of mentioned, these guys have been there, done that. They're the most experienced team in Major League Baseball when it comes to just playoff games. And I think for them, it was like low heart rate. This is nothing. This is still just another game for them. For the Mariners, I think it was a little bit more pressing. And I think it was a little bit more tension there. And you could just see it by the celebration, like you said, with the Astros. It was like handshakes and we got a lot more work to do. This doesn't mean shit to them.
Yeah, it was kind of a limp to the finish line for Texas, but they did secure a spot with Seattle losing. Texas built capital with a 6-game win streak from the 19th to the 25th. And for me, I was very vocal about it on this show. I was like, I don't think Texas is, I think they might slip out of this thing. I think they might slip out of this thing. And as soon as they got to the end of that 6-game win streak, I just had to admit defeat. And they won enough games to solidify themselves. But man, I don't know. I still have a ton of concerns when they get into the wild card format. I don't know how that pitching is going to hold up.
I am nervous about the pitching. No doubt about that. And I'm happy they got in because you know what? They've played so well for so much of the season, and the injuries and some of the unfortunate things. They should have had a full year of Corey Seager, and that would have helped a lot. He probably would have been an 8-win guy. We wanted to see even a healthy Scherzer, even if it's diminished. Nate Eovaldi was tracking like a Cy Young guy, and then gets hurt. I'm glad he's back, but he's just not the same guy before, and as he was before. So and then of course DeGrom going down after 6 starts. There's just been a lot of unfortunate aspects to the season for the Rangers. So I'm glad they got in, but yeah, I'm with you. I got a lot of concerns. It helps that Jamont looks like one of the more trustworthy starters right now, and he's been awesome all year long. But yeah, man, it's interesting. I'm happy that they said they're not ruling out a Scherzer return, but I'm not going to trust him very much. That said, I'd love to see Scherzer throw at some point in the postseason. But yeah, it's a interesting situation for this Rangers team, but I'm not counting out that offense. I'm not counting out the ability to kind of piece it together here, and we'll see. But I mean, even through this finish, you had a Chapman blown save. You still have some questions with the bullpen. I mean, I'm worried about him, but again, they can slug, and they're going to need to slug.
Real quick on Jamont, did you see what he said about his wife?
No.
His wife is a doctor. He said, quote, "She loves how dumb I am, and that's what makes it work."
I love that.
Huge on
I
that.
love that.
That's why my girlfriend's in med school, which is just awesome. She likes the idiocy that comes from me. I don't think you like it, but we can get it deeper into that a little bit later. If we did like a South Beach Sessions type thing. Yeah.
South Beach Sessions.
Last one is Toronto. Toronto won the games they needed to win in spite of Vladdy not getting to his hit total for Peter, which is a damn shame. Toronto, I actually look at in the opposite light to Texas, and this may be the death sentence for Toronto, me saying this. You put them in a postseason series, and I think fucking anything can happen with the Toronto Blue Jays. They can pitch their way to a World Series. I do firmly believe that. And if Vladdy turns it on, and if Bichette is Bichette, and if the complementary pieces can do anything, I think that Toronto can be dangerous for any team they run into in the American League or the National League.
I think they're dangerous, no doubt about it. They're extremely talented. I'm just so, and again, this doesn't matter because baseball is not played this way, but in the playoffs, I do think it does matter a little bit more. I don't have that much faith in whoever gets the ball game too. And who is it going to be? It's going to be Barrios.
I
like that. There's just so many 4 or 5 earned run starts. Maybe you short leash him and hope the bullpen goes. But I also, who locks it down? Jordan Romano to me is a setup guy masked as a closer. And so those two things are concerning, but to your point, they rake. The lineup's long. I think they have the ability, if they're hot, if you get a hot Barrios and a hot Chris Bassett, they can pitch. And Kikuchi sleeps 15 hours, they're in good shape.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a team that, I don't want to run into, but I could also see them just falling flat. So there's no in between with them. And I hope they play Davis Schneider, though. That's all I'll say. And stop MLB, stop fucking him with the, calls outside the zone. How nobody has had more called strikes outside the zone than Davis Schneider. Why? Like, why? It's crazy to me. Do that to somebody else, please.
You know what they hate the stash thing he's got going on.
It must be the stash.
Do you remember early Julio in 2022? J-Rod was getting hosed left.
Hosed, absolutely demolished.
I was like, okay, he's the young kid, top prospect. You want to hey, this is the show. Welcome to the show, bub. Davis Schneider, come on, throw him a bone, man.
Give him a smaller zone. If anything,
zone. Competitive advantage, man. He's not a scratch golfer. But no, he does.
I think he is actually. I'm pretty sure he is literally a scratch golfer.
Damn it. Okay.
Of all the things you could have said, I'm pretty sure. If not, he's very close. I know he's nasty at golf. He's not, like you said, in the offseason, all he does is golf to hang with his dog and chill.
Dude, the number of players that just all they do is golf in the offseason is absolutely insane.
I kind of get it. I get it.
But also nobody's into tennis or going on walks.
I don't know. Going on walks are boring. Troy Johnson said Marlins minor league player of the year. Troy Johnson swears that golf actually helped him with his swing for this year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting.
I know one walk guy in professional baseball that I've talked to, and that's Justin Henry Malloy, which that conversation's over on the call up. And he said, I love my morning walks. And I was like, okay.
Which is funny because he also walks in the baseball version of walks as much as anybody in professional baseball.
Yes. So there we go, man. That guy's all about walking. All right. Foolish Baseball makes his return to the Just Baseball show tomorrow. Going to be you two with Foolish walking through your playoff predictions. We have a very fun week planned. We've got obviously the wild card stuff. We're going to do a DS preview on Saturday. That'll be a Saturday morning live stream. We'll put some of that stuff out on our social medias, and it'll be YouTube live. It'll be Twitch. It'll be live streamed on Twitter as well. And we're going to kind of walk through the DS. Hopefully we have a couple of special guests pop in and kind of offer their thoughts on the NLDS and the ALDS as well. So that'll be Saturday morning, no episode Friday, but tomorrow it's going to be Aram, Peter, and Foolish Baseball giving their postseason predictions and maybe filling out a bracket or something now that we have seating. So are you ready for postseason ball?
No, I don't count 2020. So
was that a stupid question? Are you ready for postseason ball?
It's rhetorical kind of, but I don't know what a Marlins playoff game looks like with fans in attendance. I very, very vaguely remember 2003. So yeah, the little kid in me is happy in that regard. I mean, I used to always talk about it with my dad of if the Marlins make the playoffs, can I get out of school? Can we go? And he was like, yeah, sure, of course, knowing that they're not going to make it. But if they made it, he would have had to take me. They never did. And here we are, or I'm definitely going to try to go if they make it, which is pretty awesome. Also real quick, just wanted to thank everybody. I mean, the amount of messages, I thought YouTube comments, DMs, replies, everybody just sending their kind thoughts, after my grandfather passed away. I can't thank everybody enough. It was some of the most heartwarming messages I got. So to all those who reached out, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much that meant to me and my family. I shared a lot of those with my mom and my sister, and they were very moved by a lot of the messages that you all sent. So thank you so much for that.
We do love you guys. We really do. We make fun of each other all the time. We make fun of, I guess, just baseball fans in general, but we fucking love you guys. And Aram, love you, bro.
Love you guys. Love you as well, Jack.
All right. We will talk to you tomorrow.